Hi, welcome, Anne. With us today, we have Anne Hollander, the VP of AI and Innovation from Winn Companies. But I'd love to turn it over to you for maybe a quick introduction of yourself and your background, and we'll get right into the conversation.
You bet. Excited to be here today. So, Anne Hollander, I'm the VP of AI and Innovation at Winn Companies. Excited to have joined the organization here within the affordable housing world after a long career across tech, fintech, AI, innovation, and of course, real estate. I've served in a number of different roles. I've been in tech since 1996, in AI since 2004, and in real estate since 2009. So excited to bring some insight to the conversation today.
Perfect. And today, I think we're really going to dig into, how to implement AI at existing legacy companies with existing legacy systems and processes. So, I first love just jump right into it. And the first question I have is, specialize in like AI readiness assessments for organizations. So when you walk into a company that's already running legacy systems, legacy processes, what are the first things that you sort of do to determine whether they're actually ready for AI, or even if, a lot of folks are probably very excited about it. So what's step one?
Yeah, so we've got a lot of organizations who are very excited about AI. We have a number of organizations who are also a little fearful of AI, and really the opinions and the perspectives on AI can really span the gamut of this is a great thing, it's going to completely transform the business, to this is a bit scary, we need to figure out where our risk thresholds look like, to we hear this thing and the board is saying we need to implement it but have no idea where to go from here. And so typically when I go into organizations and start chatting about AI readiness, I actually don't have any conversations about artificial intelligence whatsoever. It's not at all where I start. We just stop talking about AI, and instead we start talking about the business itself. What are the objectives? Where are the differentiators that they see? Where are the strengths and the weaknesses that they're perceiving across the business? Where are the headaches that exist and the gaps today? Where are the opportunities? What are the priorities across the board for the business? And with that, then we start thinking about, okay, well, what's the value of addressing those particular things, right? If we're going to layer in on the strengths that we have or the differentiators, or go capture around opportunities, what does that value look like? How do we talk about that value today? And then from there, we can start talking about, okay, well, where's the gaps? What's stopping you from going to get those things, or stopping you from going to solve them? And this can look like so many different things. It could look like, well, we don't trust the data. We don't have the data. The data is in a mess overall. Our technology doesn't support it. The systems that we have are legacy and, were created without even a thought of AI whatsoever. Our process sucks. Systems are everywhere, no idea who owns actually what. We need to go get buy-in. We need an understanding of the baseline that we have, right? The gaps can be huge, but then that begins to tell us quite a bit about what the opportunity for AI or other types of technologies can look like inside of the organization. And so that's where we start that conversation. And when we start there, right, when able to define that value, we don't get people scared about what it is that we're going to actually come in and do, right? We can help avoid some of the conversation around AI is going to take my job, AI is going to replace me, AI is wrong or inaccurate or hallucinates. And while some of these things may be true in some organizations, we can really begin to avoid a lot of that conversation as we're actually going in to scope what AI can look like inside of the org.
Right. So, what do you say to organizations? Because, a lot of people have been mandated to do AI, and they come in and all those questions you ask are great. And there's a lot of folks that have thoughtful answers to it. But some folks are like, we don't even know where to start. And they say, what do you recommend? So what is your answer to folks that haven't even come in with sort of a game plan? I think everyone sees the writing on the wall that we need to start implementing systems, but there's almost analysis paralysis on where to start.
Sure. Yeah. And this begins with a place of vision and strategy. Like with any other technology that's out there, or any other organization, or anything else that you would want to do, we really need to think about from the perspective of what do we care about, and why do we care about that particular thing? How does this align today with what we've got? Our data strategy, our tech strategy, our talent strategy, our culture strategy, our differentiators, and where we need to go. From there, it's then who is accountable for each one of these different things. And so when we begin to think about where to start, it really begins in that vision and strategy of thinking about AI from a more global top-down perspective. Now, when we get to the execution part, we're seeing sort of two things come about at the same time. We have some organizations who are layering in general purpose AI tools, right? Your Copilots, your Claudes, your ChatGPTs, your Geminis, your Perplexities, throwing out access to all of these tools and saying, good luck, have fun, to all of their employees and all of their folks, with the results that exactly you would expect, right? Nobody necessarily knows how to use this.
Yeah, exactly.
right? You have 10% of folks who figure it out for themselves and then start building in and on this and start adapting their own tasks and processes around it, but then very quickly get frustrated because it doesn't connect to other things. And so the manual work just effectively gets pushed somewhere else outside of the work, the individual task or process that they've got. And really, you're not necessarily getting the kind of value that you're looking for back out of a $30 a month type of license. And so with this then, right, we also need that top-down approach where things like that maybe aren't as exciting to talk about, things like policy and governance, setting out your guiding principles, understanding workflows as a whole and where AI can potentially come in top down with buy-in to go address these particular things so that you get to a place where, even in 90 days, you can be at a place where at a minimum you have a proof of concept for an updated workflow or process that can be AI enabled or AI augmented or even AI replaced in a lot of different areas in the org.
Yeah, and you said 10%. I feel like that's even generous. I think a lot of people's answer was like, we'll just give everyone the tools. The number I've heard is like 4 to 5%. And some of it just comes from like, you could get a little higher percentage points just by like training, education, and sort of hand holding that first step. So you also mentioned 90 days, right? So I know you've launched AI tools from inside organizations. So what do you feel is like a key difference between a successful launch of a tool or a process versus one that fizzles out after, 90 days?
Yeah, so it's all starting with adoption, right? More than anything else. And so as we scope here, we're gonna put AI or we're gonna put automation in here. We're gonna put whatever it may be as part of this process or workflow. We start next to the adoption piece, right? What is this gonna look like for the end users? What are they gonna have to change in their processes or their workflows? And so when we think about that adoption, innovation comes from a wide variety of directions. We can throw any kinds of technology at things. We can make process improvements all over the place. But ultimately, if it is too hard, if it's too complex, if the use case itself is too infrequent, it's too costly, it's still disconnected from other things, right? Your adoption is going to lag on this, and that's going to drag down the value and ultimately the returns that you're looking for out of this. So when I think about success with AI, it is all about adoption. Who's going to be using this? Where are they going to be using it? Are they going to be held accountable to this? Does that match with their expectations? Or do we have to do a full change management process in addition to the actual rollout of the technology to ensure that folks are actually going to adopt this and use this going forward?
Okay, so with the larger programs, the change management is an absolute. Do you find it valuable to sort of spoon feed or baby step and start with processes that wouldn't need that you can get off the ground? Or are those just, are they sort of self-fulfilling prophecies where they're so easy that they have a chance to fizzle out? Or is there value?
They're so easy, they have a chance to fizzle out. Everybody's doing it differently. And so sometimes what we see is this person's doing it this way, this person's doing it this way, this person's doing it this way, and they don't have an incentive in any way, shape, or form to change because it's so easy to change that process. They can just change right back. It's not a big deal. Sometimes what we see instead are taking on what I'll call mid-complexity or high-feasibility mid-complexity type of workflows. The types of things where we can go get buy-in because the headache is so great or the value out on the other side is so clear and obvious to folks, or we can communicate it in such a way that it is clear and obvious, where we're starting to get that buy-in. And then the other component of it is actually prototyping and proof of concepting. I'm a big fan there. Before we get to a place where we're changing out systems or really radically changing what workflows look like, it's instead, let's prototype this through and see if this works and see if this matches. I don't expect the business to be technologists, nor do I expect the technologists to know, the ins and outs of every single process and workflow across the business. And so with prototypes, right, we can have those up and running in 2 to 4 weeks. We can actually put our hands on it and test it, see if this is something that begins to make sense, and then I can hear all of the objections up front of why this will never be adopted inside of the organization.
Okay, interesting. So slightly off topic, should the AI team or the AI chief AI officer, whatever the title is going to be, sit closer to the business or they should sit closer to technology?
I wish I had a definitive answer for this. I feel as though I have a foot in both worlds, right? I understand the real estate world. I work with the business quite a bit. Ultimately, they're the ones getting the value out of it. That said, right, on the tech side, they're the ones ultimately responsible for the maintenance and monitoring of these tools. In some cases where we're building tools around this, they're also having to develop and design and deploy these. And so as they think about the life cycle of any AI augmented or AI native tool that we've got, you got to have a foot in both worlds and be able to translate back and forth between the two. Does this lead to some like Office Space type moments? Absolutely.
Of course, yeah, fair
Right.
enough.
Where, all I do is translate back and forth, but it ends up creating an environment for success between the two that, right, again, tech doesn't have to know the ins and out of every single business workflow and the exact value that we're going to be driving back out of this. And the business doesn't have to know necessarily how the sausage gets made over on the tech side. It just works.
Okay, got it. So, we've seen this a lot where there's a task that somebody does, they've been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years. It's very repeatable. And the question is like, why don't you use AI for this to that person? And they're like, it's one of two answers. They're like, well, I didn't know I could. Or they're like, it's so easy for me to stop and go rebuild this in an AI system. Seems like it's not worth the investment of my time or the company's time. What do you say to somebody that's sort of like, let me just keep throwing a person at this problem?
So, I think this all comes back to a question of value more than anything. There are some workflows and processes where AI is not the solution, right? This is not the be all end all silver bullet for any type of technology implementation. Some processes are not built for automation. They're too variable in nature. And with AI even sprinkled on top to help provide more context to that automation, it's still not good enough in a lot of different ways. The way I think about this oftentimes is, in what I'll call the olden days, we used to have pools of stenographers, note takers that would sit inside of the business and transcribe and take notes for every single meeting that happened that particular day, type them up and then deliver them out to the meeting attendees and then put them on file somewhere. Modern technology changed that role pretty significantly, where we no longer have steno pools sitting in a lot of our businesses, but the role itself still actually exists in areas where it's valuable to do so. Things like medical professionals, for example, will bring in a scribe or a note taker where they're taking notes along the way so that you have that person-to-person interaction with empathy from the medical professional that you're working with. In the legal field, we can't tolerate mistakes or hallucinations that AI would potentially give. And so what we see are still, to this day, court reporters and folks who are transcribing by hand those depositions because the cost of a mistake is still so great that we don't trust technology to go and do that. The same is going to be true flipped, right, with AI. AI is not going to necessarily drive all of the value for every single process and workflow that you could potentially automate or potentially leverage AI for, because the cost is going to be too high if something goes wrong, or the value just simply isn't there.
Got it. Okay. So another question, right? So the AI tools, really blew up in about around 2023-ish, maybe 2022. And so it's been about 2.5 years of the time this recording, and my math is probably wrong there. But when large organizations come and they say we need AI, some folks will say, cool, the 90-day project is we come in for 90 days and talk to everyone and figure out what they want, and then we'll come back and tell you where the AI solutions are. There seems to be an exhaustion there of saying, you tell me what you need, and that'll be the first project, where, they're like, it's been around for 2.5 to some years. There have to be some real use cases that are defined, designed, implementable. So what is the true 90-day plan if you were to walk into an organization like right now?
Yep. If I were to walk in right now, what we would do is a few things. One, from top down, what we would do is set what are our guiding principles in and around AI? What's our AI strategy going to look like, and how does that align with tech and data today inside of this organization? Without those three things aligned, it really doesn't matter what you do there. And we do that pretty quickly. From two, then we set out AI policy and governance and begin to put that in place from top down. We can parallel path that with the AI readiness assessments, right? Where are use cases going to end up? Again, not talking about AI, but instead talking about what are the business priorities, where do we need to focus, what are the objectives that we need to go and hit, so that we have that shift from top-down buy-in into bottom-up. Please help me fix this thing, help me with this process. And one of the benefits there is that we can oftentimes identify who our champions or our early adopters are going to be inside of the organization, regardless of whether this is just a rollout of a general purpose tool or something more than that. From there, then, what we look at is, right, who's going to be accountable for doing what? Are we going to be building or buying things? Are we going to partner in certain ways on some various components of this? What is that going to look like? Who's going to be managing and monitoring this and ensuring that we have the resources to go and do this? And then we start executing. Oftentimes when we execute, we try to build proof of concepts first, right? Something that the business can put their hands on, or get deep demos of particular capabilities where we can try it out, test it out, and validate whether or not, A, this makes sense inside of the business, and then two, were our assumptions about this particular tool or capability correct. From there, assuming success with that, we go in and begin to systematize this from an enterprise standpoint, integrating that in and augmenting our existing workflows. sometimes what we do is a full process redesign as well, depending on how old or broken that particular process is, the systems that are involved, the data or tech that's required in and around that going forward. And we may redesign what that looks like to better go forward as AI continues to move into the organization. Just because we start in one place doesn't mean we're going to end there. Oftentimes, data, particularly in a commercial real estate organization, flows to everybody, right? I always say that all roads lead to asset management, investment management. No matter who you are in the organization, anything you touch is going to flow right back to them in so many different ways. And so with that, then we start giving them the tools that they can use as much as possible, and everybody begins to get some benefit out of an AI implementation.
Very cool. All right, so last question, probably the most abstract and hardest one. Is the ROI conversation. So when you're explaining to like a leadership team that's skeptical, how do you quantify the value of automation to them?
Yeah. So when we talk about this, I use 3 frames. So depending on what it is that we're talking about, and each organization is a little bit different in how they're thinking about the business itself. More risk-adverse businesses are going to be closer to what I call the defend or the core type of things that we're going to do. And oftentimes the language that we use around that is, right, this is going to be the status quo of how every real estate organization operates going forward, right? We know that these are the types of things that are going to come in, be embedded, and in every use case in every single real estate organization. And so with this, then we defend the core. And oftentimes what we're talking about there is a percentage increase in the value metric. So whatever value we've identified up front of the objectives or the strengths or the opportunities that we're seeing, that comes back around in terms of a return. And so that percentage increase can look like things like number of hour, percentage of time saved, percentage of capacity that's been created with new types of tools, leveraging a lot of the telemetry that's on the backside of a lot of the existing systems within legacy organizations. The second frame of this is then what I call the expand piece, right? And this is where we're beginning to look at return on investment. Oftentimes these are longer term projects because we're thinking about redesign in a number of different ways. We're thinking about process redesign, we're thinking about culture redesign, we're thinking about talent redesign in a very gradual type of way, where we're expanding on the strengths or the capabilities of the existing business today or creating new differentiators for ourselves. Within the expand piece, right, that's where we really get started talking about X increases of things, right? 5X X increases in whatever the value is that's been identified there. The last piece here is then that transformational component. And most organizations will take on maybe one type of transformational thing that really leads to the core differentiator of how they do business very, very differently. And so when we talk about ROI there, it's much longer term. We're not going to do this. We're not going to calculate an ROI for upwards of potentially 5 to 10 years, where we're really beginning to make big infrastructure changes inside of the organization. We're redoing the architecture of all of the different systems that we have today. We're thinking through data rights. We're thinking through what our talent looks like inside of the organization 5 to 10 years from now. And we're not going to think about terms of ROI. We're instead going to be really painting the picture of the vision around this and what that is going to mean, oftentimes at like 100 to 1,000x of where they're at today.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat here. It was super valuable. Yeah, and look forward to hearing more. But
Awesome.
Thanks so much. All right, Anne, it was nice to connect. Bye.